Now, the BuckeyeXtra podcast with Joey Kaufman and Rob Oller from the Columbus Dispatch.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this week's edition of the BuckeyeXtra football podcast. I'm Joey Kaufman, joined by Rob Oller, and it's Ohio State, Penn State week, except not really the game that we had circled on our calendars back in the summertime when it looked like this was potentially going to be a top 5 matchup. Instead, it's the number 1 ranked team in the country, the Ohio State Buckeyes, against Penn State, which is reeling in 3-4 overall, 4 straight losses, all of them in the Big Ten, and no more James Franklin on the sideline in State College.
Yeah, at one point this was going to be a huge game. I mean, I think even preseason might have had Ohio State losing this one. Well, I had them with 1 loss during the regular season, maybe 2. I can't remember now, but Penn State was going to be a battle. I mean, they had Drew Aller, can't say my own name and his name, Drew Aller, who I've never been as high on as some, but still he was probably above average. Now he's gone for the season with his injury. James Franklin in I don't know if shocking, but sudden dismissal, $49,000 dismissal. Was that what it was? His buyout. So a lot of steam has been lost from this game, but it's still intriguing because I think, and I'm guilty of this too, I think this is going to be a walkover. And outside of Texas, and maybe even more than Texas, Penn State, which was preseason number 2 behind Texas, still has to have a lot of talent. It's got to have more talent than anyone else other than Texas, maybe Michigan, that Ohio State's played. So just on talent alone, if you forget all the other circumstances, it should be a closer game, and it probably will be, but they're just a mess right now. They're a dumpster fire, and it's hard to come back from that. Now, maybe the pressure's gone, and they can just play fast and loose and give Ohio State a game, especially if Ohio State, which we'll get into, their run game is not. So we'll see what happens. What are your thoughts on the Nits?
I see the argument for this being a close game and competitive because Penn State always plays Ohio State close. I mean, there are very few times where the Buckeyes have just run away with it in the last decade. These tend to be sort of slugfest, and Penn State does have talent on paper. You look at the blue chip ratio that CBS Sports 247 Sports puts together each year. About 2/3 of the Penn State roster, or the players it signed over the years were either 4 or 5-star recruits. And other than Texas, it's the highest percentage of any team that Ohio State will face this season. But then you look at some of the intangibles. And even some of the tangibles, Drew Aller is no longer part of that equation. And then the intangibles, this is a team that's lost 4 games in a row here and is in jeopardy of missing a bowl game. They play at Ohio State this week, and then they're hosting Indiana next week. So they could be 3-6 really fast and needing to beat Michigan State, Nebraska, Rutgers just to make a bowl game. So this is a team that's went from being a college football playoff shoo-in, maybe a national championship winner, and instead they're fighting and they're clawing their way just to make a bowl game. And just what is the mood in that locker room and their willingness to come in here and give Ohio State a game, because there are 2 sides of that coin. There's a team that has nothing to lose and they throw everything in the kitchen sink at Ohio State, or they're a team that just is ready to fold up, pack up, and be done with this season.
Yeah, I think that's well said. That's a good way to couch it. Let's not forget that Ohio State is really good. So, I mean, even if Penn State was on their game, I'm not sure they'd be favored. I think Ohio State would still be favored. I will say in Penn State's defense, and this is a weak defense, probably because I picked them either to win the national title or like lose to, I think, Texas. in the national title game, something like that. I don't know. But if you look at the losses, hear me out. They lost to UCLA out on the West Coast. It's tough to win on the coast, and UCLA had just started to put it together. Now, UCLA is not some world beater, but they had a little stretch there where they were pretty good. And if you took them lightly and you were coming off a loss to Oregon, as Penn State was, a crushing defeat, where they started to doubt themselves, are we really that good? Well, you can see that UCLA game as being one of those trap games loss. There's no defense for the Northwestern loss. Then you have Iowa, and Iowa's sneaky good. I was looking at like who is Iowa? I've been looking at comparative scores, and Iowa, Iowa lost by 5 points to Indiana. And Iowa is probably better now they got their offense going. Their defense is really good. So Iowa beat, I think, Penn State by a point. So if you're going to just really look at it objectively, Penn State's probably not as bad as their record, or at least not as bad as losing 4 straight, with the Northwestern and the UCLA being a little bit of an exception there. I mean, they lost to Oregon, in a close game. That said, even if go ahead.
4 losses that Penn State has are by a combined 13 points.
Right, there you go. So, yeah, and 2 of them were bad teams or really bad losses. The other 2 weren't. So, you look at that, and I think I think I even called it somewhat of a cakewalk game. And I probably have gotten caught up in the intangibles of what you've talked about with Penn State. But there is the chance they just come freewheeling and their talent rises, and this quarterback from Olentangy, plays out of his mind against his hometown team that he grew up, rooting for, and we have a game. I mean, Ohio State's offense, once you get past the passing game, which I'm sure you're going to talk about, is the run game is still a question mark. We just don't know.
Yeah. Here's the other way to look at it. The analytics people would say that close losses are sometimes fluky because 1 or 2 plays go the other way, the record totally changes. And so you look at some of the metrics. Penn State is 20th in SP plus, Bill Connolly's rankings, which is actually 1 spot ahead of Michigan. So there are some charitable ways to look at Penn State's season. I think I'm not trying to sell you on Penn State as a great team, but it does seem like the type of game where if Ohio State comes out, is sloppy, plays with its food a little bit, that they could be in an uncomfortable position. I mean, you take Ryan Day's track record against unranked, overmatched teams, I think, for granted in a lot of cases, but there's chaos in college football, and Penn State does have some talent on the roster and is a few plays away from not being at least 3 and 4. So Ohio State does have some things to figure out in its own regard.
That's fair. And again, talent. John Cooper always said, give me the more talented team. I don't, coaching is overrated somewhat. Give me the talented team. Of course, he had, some pretty talented teams that spit the bit at times, but Penn State's got talent. I mean, I kind of see it as a Washington game a little bit. Washington had some talent, not as much as Penn State. So, but Ohio State took care of business out there on the road too. So,
I think the other thing that's interesting about this matchup, obviously, is Jim Knowles is on the other sideline in this matchup. The defensive coordinator for the Nittany Lions spent 3 seasons at Ohio State, and he's going up against Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, and obviously all those 3 guys know each other well, and they're intimately familiar with what they like to call and situations, and who does that favor? Ryan Day has not really faced a ton of former coordinators over the years. Probably the thing you would like if you're an Ohio State fan is when he has faced former defensive coordinators, Don Brown in Michigan in 1819, he did well. Day and Don Brown were on staff together at Boston College in the 2010s, and that matchup favored Day certainly both of those times. And how does what's the Knowles factor? That certainly is an X factor, I think, for this one.
Yeah, great point. The other thing we should address is, they don't play Penn State again till 2028. I've been a proponent that they should be on the schedule yearly. I just think that Penn State is as much of is the number two rival after Michigan, clearly to me. I love the environment in State College. I just think the Pennsylvania, Ohio prep rivalry, a lot of talent in both states. I just think it should be a yearly thing. It's not. So enjoy this while you can, because it's what, 3 more years before
Yeah,
they play again? Well, I mean, presumably, I guess you could face off in the playoff or in the Big Ten championship game, maybe.
but it's not going to be on campus in either 26 or 27. And this game has such great environments at both schools, Beaver Stadium, Ohio Stadium. It gets raucous, and that's lost without it being a yearly game. And just some background: the very few games now are protected annually in the Big Ten since they expanded to 18 teams. There, I believe there are 11 protected annual rivalries in the conference. The only protected one for Ohio State is Michigan. So the rest of the teams will go on and off the schedule. The idea was to maybe play teams 3 out of every 4 years on average. And look, when they set this schedule up, Ohio State and Penn State could have pushed for it to be a protected game. And Penn State did not. Penn State has no protected rivals as part of this new structure. And Ohio State didn't really push back on that at all. Gene Smith, I remember at the time, sort of categorized the Penn State series as a competitive rivalry, but Michigan was a historical rivalry. And so they basically kind of let it go. But I'm sure the people at Fox would have liked it to be a protected game, or other conference partners, because it'll do great ratings. I think it has been a very popular competitive series since Penn State joined the Big Ten. They've played every year since the Nittany Lions joined the league in 93. This will be the 33rd consecutive game. So I think it really has defined the conference rivalries in the last 3 decades. It's been among the closest games in the Big Ten East. It's not the historical weight of Ohio State, Michigan, because you don't look back in the 60s or the 70s or 80s. But it's been a great series in recent years, and you do probably lose something with it going off the schedule here.
Well, something important you said is Penn State did not want this to be a protected rivalry. And if you're Penn State, why would you, from a competitive standpoint? You've lost to Ohio State.
Everyone since 2016.
Yeah, so it's like from just WL standpoint, wins and losses, do you want to play Ohio State every year and take your lumps? Now, I'm not sure how they looked at it, but maybe that plays into it. From Ohio State's side, I kind of think that you mentioned the Gene Smith comment, and it does fit in that Ohio State probably doesn't want to do anything to water down Ohio State, Michigan. They kind of, Buckeyes puff out their chests that, it's the greatest rivalry in sports. Cough, cough, Ohio, college football. Yankees, Red Sox is pretty good, and there's actually some really good ones in college football. But let's give it to Ohio State. You don't want anything to take away from that. So, you know what? And from Ohio State's standpoint, even though you've dominated Penn State, that's one less power team you have to really play every year. So that helps you.
Well, especially say next year, for example, they're going to play Oregon and USC in the regular season.
There you go.
That's part of the trade-off they made. I think what would have been interesting is if Penn State had really wanted it to be played annually, how Ohio State would have responded. Because I think it was kind of easy for Ohio State to really push back on the idea. And it does help those schools in terms of just trying to game the schedule a little bit. What's the cleanest path to try to get the 10-2 or 11-1 in the regular season and be really in line to make the playoff? And that's what so much of the sport is centered around now. And I think it's helpful for both of those schools in that endeavor. But if you're a millennial or you're Gen Z, I mean, Penn State, Ohio State is not certainly Ohio State, Michigan, but it's certainly an annual game that was part of your college football tradition, and it tended to be played kind of mid-season here, October, early November. It's about a month before Michigan. You kind of get to see how in Ohio State in a big high stakes game against another Midwestern school.
Yeah, and on top of that, it's just a great atmosphere both places. But I mean, Beaver Stadium whiteouts they're top of the list. Now, maybe not playing every year makes them even more special. You would hope
I've
that
still never seen a state whiteout.
you would hope in 28. Oh, you haven't done a whiteout.
No,
Oh,
because my first year on the beat was 19, and then the first time I went to Penn State was 20. There were no fans for that game, and then the new TV schedule kicked in, and they've had two new games in 22 and 24 times I've been to State College with fans in the seats.
yeah, well, it's pretty special. It's right at the top. I would put it probably number one in the Big Ten. Again, we've talked about this. Outs in Oregon was pretty intense, but I'll give it to Penn State. Again, maybe in 2028 it won't be a noon game. Maybe Fox won't have it, and it'll be a night game and a whiteout. We can only hope. Not that I'm a huge fan of whiteouts, being up till ungodly hours writing, but for the fans' sake, the night games are a good deal. Some fans' sake, some don't like them. The older the fan, the more they like those nooners, it feels like. So what does Ohio State need to get out of this game? What you've been on top of this. What do you see?
I think they need to get better in some situational stuff, but I think from a bigger picture perspective, the run game has certainly trended in the wrong direction. I think the last few weeks here, before Ohio State was off last week, you look at the way they ran the ball at Illinois, and then at Wisconsin, neither case was terribly ideal. They had 106 yards at Illinois, less than 3 yards per carry, then 98 yards at Wisconsin, 3.5 yards per carry. I don't think that was what they really wanted to see. And I think the issue with Wisconsin was just not getting enough of maybe a push at times from the offensive line. There were several times where Bo Jackson or Isaiah West was hitting the backfield for a loss, and they've looked at some things. Ryan Day is probably the most brought up or entertained questions the most about what they're going to do with the right side of the offensive line at right guard. Tegra Shabola has rotated a little bit more in recent weeks with Joshua Padilla, and Day has acknowledged that Padilla would be is sort of their sixth man on the offensive line, and somebody who they have looked at as somebody who can rotate in and take snaps, and when they ever make a full-on personnel change and go to Padilla over Shabola. But they need to get better, I think, across the board on the offensive line. And I think coming into the year, you knew maybe at times they weren't going to be as explosive without Trayvon Henderson there. But the last 2 weeks in Big Ten play, they haven't been as efficient. I do think the off week probably helped Bo Jackson a little bit. He was banged up at Illinois, and they held him out for the fourth quarter. Would look like some sort of a lower body injury, and I imagine the off week for him will have been helpful. It seemed like maybe he was dealing with an ankle injury because they rewrapped his ankle in that game at Illinois. It looked like so. Maybe some extra time will help rejuvenate the running game as well. But it's not been the strength of their offense. And Penn State is a team you probably can run the ball against. They are last in the Big Ten in rush defense in conference games. They're allowing over 200 yards per game. So I'm curious if Ohio State will come out trying to take advantage of that or just lean on its playmakers like it did against Wisconsin, because they were very pass heavy early on. But I think second half of the season, as it gets colder and you gear up for Michigan, I think you're always trying to maybe take the pulse of where the run game is.
Yeah, it's good analysis there. I think one thing that has not been talked about much this year, like what's different? Okay, you lost Trevion Henderson. You lost Quinshon Judkins, but you also lost, and it's hard for me to say this in a sense, Josh Fry, the line coach, who was underwhelming for much of the last few years. He took a lot of heat, it feels like. And then last year, when the injuries started to happen, his stature grew because they kind of patchwork things and it really worked out. And he got a lot of credit and then made the jump to the Arizona Cardinals. Um, and then they brought in, who is it, Bowen?
Collarbone.
Yeah. And I hardly heard his name mentioned negatively. It's like all been just sort of, well, the running backs, the line, but who's the coach there? So I just find at some point that temperature is going to turn up if they can't run the game ball on Tyler Bowen. I mean, he came in very highly touted, run game coordinator and all this, and I'm not taking a shot at him. All I'm saying is that's something else that's different other than just new personnel.
Yeah, I think some of the pushback that Fry got at times at Ohio State was
Recruiting.
related to recruiting as much as I think the fan base as a whole seemed to acknowledge that he was, I think, good in terms of managing the position group on a whole, and certainly after the job he did last year. Here's the other thing too, I think for the running game that's different is they do have a lot of returning experience on the offensive line, but their running back rotation has sort of been in flux this year. It's changed week to week. Bo Jackson has sort of been the primary starter over the last month or so, but C.J. Donaldson's worked in. Isaiah West got a lot more carries. Freshman really hadn't done all that much in the first half of the season, but they really worked him in against Wisconsin. And then you also have James Peoples, who began the season as a starting running back against Texas. So you have four guys, and how does Ohio State really try to structure its rotation? I think Donaldson is clearly the preferred short yardage back or somebody who can be involved in the pass game. And then you have Bo Jackson, and then where do James Peoples and Isaiah West fit in as well? And how do you manage maybe three guys in that rotation? That remains to be seen, because typically it's been one or two guys as part of some backfield duo. Having this many guys has been, I think, a different sort of thing Ohio State's has to manage. And they have been clear that they have not really fine-tuned it yet. They're still trying to figure it out. The plus side is I don't think they've worn anybody down. I think all their legs should be fresh going into November and then the postseason. But I'm still not really sure if they know what they have and who to rely on in certain spots quite yet out of that group of backs.
Yeah, it feels like James Peoples is the odd man out at this point. Just if you're reading the tea leaves, because CJ is your power back. Bo Jackson's kind of your main guy. I thought the West kid.
I thought he showed.
He looked pretty. He looked as good as Peoples, and Peoples came into the season highly touted. I remember people saying, "Well, this guy's your next guy." I mean, Bo Jackson was like, yeah, he showed some flash in the spring, but it was all Peoples. You just never. That's why I say you just never know on these things, man. It's like, so I wouldn't shock me if you see some transfer. Although now the portal's different, so it's like I don't know how that plays
running
out.
backs too is that's a position group where you don't really know what you have until you start playing games as much. Because Isaiah West was somebody who I thought stood out against Wisconsin for his ability to, when he hit the hole, was able to sort of shake some guys off. And well, you need some game reps to quite see that. Before the Wisconsin game, he only had 11 carries all season. He had 9 against the Badgers. So some of it is just trying to find a role and see guys in live action, because it's just such a different flavor than in a practice with backs, where you want to see if they're elusive, can they break tackles, and it's a different game speed versus practice speed.
Yeah, it's I was just sitting here thinking, because this is unrelated, but in terms of how many guys are playing and backups. I'm just thinking, when was the last time, like Ohio State has had really good luck with injury-free quarterbacks? I mean, when was, in terms of long term, I know everyone, oh, guys, talking injuries. It's just, I'm just thinking about it now as, you look at the running back room and how you've got this plethora of talent, but I don't know. It's just interesting. Julian Sayin has been fantastic. You know, he's
Well,
played a little deeper into games than I would have played him, just because I may be old school of, give Lincoln Keenholz a little more, few more reps. And, this is a beating a dead horse maybe, but I think it's just safe to say we'll leave her right there. I'll leave her right there. They have been pretty fortunate with the health of their quarterbacks overall, over since going back to, I mean, Justin Fields missed a game or two, I think. Um, so yeah, they've not had any kind of season-ending thing happen. That seems to be prevalent around the country, at least after the last few years.
at quarterback?
Well, there's been enough. I mean, maybe not prevalent. Maybe it's not common, but to me, it's a little bit uncommon to have a guy make it through an entire. I mean, Will Howard was a big, brawny lad who, could handle things, handle the hits and everything like that. Um, it, this is the same thing you could say about every team. You need your starting quarterback. And I'll just say again, Ohio State has been fortunate that they've had their starter pretty much start to finish. You have to almost go back to JT Barrett against Michigan, and that worked out pretty well for Ohio State, actually.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's
I
fair.
mean, look across the field. I mean, look across the sideline, across the field. Drew Aller gone.
Yeah.
So, they
Now,
have not they have
now
not
you can
they
go.
have not faced something like that, is all I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, not since their previous national championship, but that was basically the last time.
Yeah, and that was a quirky thing, right? That was quirky because Cardale Jones goes in and nobody really knows who he is. Even I remember Nick Saban even saying in the Alabama game in the playoff game Sugar Bowl, we just didn't know much about that guy. And he had a strong arm and he's kind of become a hero, obviously this legend. But it also happened late. JT Barrett didn't go down mid-season. He went down in the Michigan game.
Yeah.
We're hoping Julian's saying, for his sake and for Buckeye Nation's sake, the fans, stays healthy.
He has been protected very well. We were
Yeah.
mentioning the offensive line just a bit earlier as far as the run game goes, but they have kept him very much upright this season. Saints only been sacked 3 times this season. Only 2 teams, Navy and Cincinnati, have allowed fewer sacks among all FBS teams. So he's done a good job of getting rid of the ball quickly. He's got a quick release, but the line has also done a nice job of making sure he doesn't get hit here.
Yeah, and again, that goes back. That's the other question. Are they so proficient and focused on pass blocking that the run blocking becomes a little stale? I can't speak to that. I guess that's a theory that, I've always kind of held. I've talked to coaches in the past that have said you can't do both things exceptionally. You can't pass block and run block exceptionally. It's not normal. I think it can be done, and the national championship teams usually do pretty well with it, but it's hard to do because of what you focus on in practice. You had a great little, I think it was you, maybe it wasn't you, but you had a little comparison. Was it you? We had a comparison in the dispatch between Julian Sayin and Will Howard through 7 games. And Julian Sayin came out ahead in like 5 categories. The only category that he was well behind in was rushing yards, which Will Howard had like 90 and Julian Sayin has like 7 or something. And I contend that he's going to have to show a little more giddy up with those legs. And after the Illinois game, interestingly enough, Brett Bielema said, "Hey, he's a really good quarterback. They must be saving him. They must be saving those legs for games that matter." Which I found interesting that a coach would not consider
It's a very Bielema comment.
very Bielema comment. And what does it say about your own team that it apparently doesn't matter because Julian Sayin didn't run much in that game? Anyhow, I just thought that was an interesting comparison that if you're wondering how Julian Sayin compares to Will Howard, quite favorably.
Yeah, he's put himself in a Heisman conversation going into November here, which is no small feat for a freshman. It's sort of reminiscent of C.J. Stroud, who was in contention for that award in his first year as a starter, and it'll inevitably come down to Thanksgiving weekend for truly as part of where he fits into that conversation. Probably even the Big Ten championship game, because the way things are going, it looks like Ohio State, Indiana, that'll be a matchup, and Fernando Mendoza has been the Hoosiers quarterback, who's another Heisman candidate. So that will, I think, have some Heisman implications as well. Let's, I guess, a final thought for Ohio State, Penn State. Do you, is this an Ohio State blowout? Is this a game that is like all Ohio State, Penn State games where it's a rock fight? Or is this Penn State upset the second time Ryan Day loses to an unranked team?
Well, my pick was, I believe, 31-3, Ohio State. I would say that if you're going to look one way or the other, it would be a closer game than that, more than a bigger blowout than that. That would be my take. I think Ohio State wins comfortably. Now, what's comfortably, right? I would say 31-3 is very comfortable. 31-10 is comfortable. 31-20, 21, that's still probably comfortable depending how it goes down. What's your take?
I pick 31-14, 31. And I think Penn State has an ability and is good enough at the line of scrimmage to make it, I think, interesting for a little bit, and at least make Ohio State work for it, where even if Ohio State is in control throughout, it's not always that pretty. I think it's just the way this team is wired, and maybe Ohio State will come out slinging it and it'll be ugly, and they take Jim Knowles' departure personally and they want to prove a point. I wouldn't rule that out, but just Penn State always has a habit, and it feels like it's in its nature to make it a slugfest, a rock fight, however you want to put it. And it would surprise me if Ohio State just ran away with it. It wouldn't surprise me, but I would expect it to be closer than that sort of lopsidedness that you sometimes see.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I expect it more like Washington than Minnesota.
Right. It won't be Grambling State.
No.
It better not be for Penn State's sake. Let's put it that way.
What's the moot point?
They got some real problems.
Really? What?
Yeah. It's kind of a shame, honestly, I think. I mean, if you like, really good matchups, a matchup game, as Ryan Day likes to call it, that seems to be that's the new term, right? A matchup game. Never even heard that. I don't think even prior to this season. It was never, he called it a matchup.
It's a favorite of Day's. He's used that pretty consistently throughout his tenure. That's how he likes to sort of term these games. He sometimes in the past used talent equated, but matchup is a little more succinct. So if I was his editor, I think you'd go with matchup game over talent equated. It's more of a mouthful.
Yeah, there you go. I'm with you. But it's better for the Big Ten, and I just think it's better for interest when Penn State's good. Just that's simple.
It feels like this chapter of this rivalry or series is going out with maybe a little more of a whimper. No more James Franklin, Ryan Day, no more top 10 matchup. This is the 33rd straight year they'll meet head to head, and it is a big noon kickoff on Fox, but it doesn't have the build up that you anticipated back in the summer. Although it's college football, weird things happen.
Weird things happen, and I would say how weird, ironic, whatever you want to call it, would it be that James Franklin could not beat the Buckeyes, but they go in with an interim coach.
Terry Smith gets it done.
Terry Smith beats the Buckeyes. That would that would ignite things.
That would make it a little spicy.
Having to make it spicy for 2028.
But that would surprise me. I think just Penn State feels like it's just trending in the wrong direction. Even though I think they're probably a little better than 3-4, this is still a team that I think is in terms of modern collapses in college football. This is up there. You typically do not see a top 5 preseason team just fall out of the top 25 altogether and be fighting an uphill battle to be bowl eligible. Let's just say if that happened in Columbus, I don't think people would be reacting all that well.
Yeah, they haven't lost 5 games. So PSU has not lost 5 games since 2004 when Joe Paterno was stalking the sidelines. He kept his job after that, by the way.
He had, I think, built up some goodwill.
He had.
At that time. Well, that does it for the BuckeyeXtra Football Podcast. Thanks for joining us and listening to us and downloading it. If you like this podcast, please feel free to give us a review. It helps people find us. We'll be back next week to break down Ohio State, Penn State, and whatever happens to transpire along the Olentangy River. Thanks for joining us.